So guys, today we are going to talk about upper motor and lower motor lesion. Before talking about the lesions of upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron, first see what is upper motor neuron and what is lower motor neuron. Here we can see the motor cortex of the cerebrum. From the motor cortex of the cerebrum, the fibers are going to the cranial nerve motor nuclei in the brain stem, or these fibers are going to the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord. These are upper motor neurons. The fibers are also going from the motor nuclei in the brain stem to the muscles, and they are also going from the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord to the muscles. These are lower motor neurons. The example of these fibers is corticobulbar fibers. Whereas the example of these fibers, we are having pyramidal tract. The example of these fibers include the motor fibers of the cranial nerves, like we can take the 7th cranial nerve motor fibers, and the example of these fibers include alpha motor neuron and gamma motor neuron. So the upper motor neurons include corticobulbar tract, pyramidal tract, whereas the lower motor neuron consists of the fibers extending from motor nuclei to the muscles, like the 7th cranial nerve motor fibers and alpha motor neuron and gamma motor neuron. In addition to this, we also have to remember that upper motor neuron also consists of extrapyramidal tract, which we are going to see later. The example of upper motor neuron lesion, we are having the lesion in pyramidal tract, which is called as hemiplegia. Whereas the example in lower motor neuron lesion includes Bell's palsy, is the lesion in the 7th cranial nerve. Now let's go to the pyramidal tract and extrapyramidal tract. Here in this figure, we are seeing that from the motor cortex, the fibers are extending down to the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord. This is the pyramidal tract. This pyramidal tract we are seeing here from the cortex to the spinal cord. So these fibers are also known as corticospinal tract. In the diagram lower here consists of the cross section of the spinal cord. The half part of it consists of the motor fibers and the remaining half part of it consists of the sensory fibers. From the corticospinal tract, they are going to dissociate at the medulla to form the lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract. Here we can see the lateral corticospinal tract, here we can see the anterior corticospinal tract. Also, I told you about the extrapyramidal system, which is also upper motor neuron. Here we are seeing the red nucleus in the midbrain. From here the fibers extend down to form the rubrospinal tract, which we can see here. This is the rubrospinal tract extending down the spinal cord. Also the midbrain consists of the tectum, from which the fiber extend down as tectospinal tract. Here we can see the tectospinal tract. Also the extrapyramidal system consists of reticulospinal tract as medial and lateral reticulospinal tract, and also the vestibulospinal tract. So finally the extrapyramidal pathway consists of rubrospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, vestibulospinal tract and tectospinal tract. So both the extrapyramidal and the pyramidal pathway are the example of upper motor neurons. Here in the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord down, here we are seeing the fibers which are extending to the muscle. These are lower motor neurons. Here we can see the cross section of again the spinal cord, from which there is arise ventral root and dorsal root. The ventral root is purely motor, whereas dorsal root is purely sensory, and they finally join to form the spinal nerve. Here we are having the anterior horn cell. The fibers which are above the anterior horn cell are upper motor neurons, because the fibers of upper motor neuron, which are pyramidal tract and extrapyramidal tract, end at anterior horn cells, and from the anterior horn cell arises the lower motor neuron. So the anterior horn cell and the fibers arising from the anterior horn cell consist of the lower motor neuron, in which we have seen it includes the alpha motor neuron and gamma motor neuron, and also the fibers of the cranial nerves, motor fibers like the seventh cranial nerve. Now we are going to see the lesion of upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. What are the findings? Here we can see this is the upper motor neuron and this is the lower motor neuron. If at all there is lesion in upper motor neuron, we are getting hyperreflexia, hypertonia, disuse atrophy. Why we are getting these all findings? It is important to know that the upper motor neurons are having an inhibitory control over the lower motor neuron. So if at all there is upper motor neuron lesion, the lower motor neurons are going to fire excessively. They are going to become overactive. Because they are going to become overactive, so we are getting hyperreflexia and hypertonia. But in case of lower motor neuron lesion, we are getting hyperreflexia and hypotonia because the muscles are denervated. Also, in case of lower motor neuron lesion, we are getting denervation atrophy. Because of loss of innervation to the nerve, we are getting denervation atrophy. Whereas in case of upper motor neurons, we are getting disuse atrophy, the atrophy which is due to not using of the muscle. This is called as the disuse atrophy. Denervation atrophy is severe in compared to disuse atrophy. So this is all about the lesions of the upper and lower motor neuron. Guys, if you have any doubt, please comment below. Thank you.